Well, let's get some more now on Donald Trump's controversial remarks advocating the banning of all Muslims from entering the United States. Joining us via Skype from Washington, D.C. is Robert Salam. He's a veteran and a former U.S. Marine who converted to Islam shortly after 9/11. Also joining us from Washington, D.C. is David Avella, who's a prominent Republican strategist. Thank you both for being with us. Mr. Salam, if I could ask you first of all, how did you feel when you heard the remarks of Donald Trump?
Yes, I was extremely disheartened and disappointed. It feels like definitely an escalation from comments that he has previously made against American Muslims and Muslims in general. But this seemed to me to be a provocation and an escalation that reached dangerous proportions.
And why did you feel that he had made these remarks? What lay behind them in your view?
Part of me feels like it's really the politics. I think that when you look at his polling, whenever he seems to slip a little bit in the polls, he says something outrageous to rile up the base and change his poll numbers. I think this is just a pattern that he's been following, that he'll just say whatever it takes to rile up a certain element in the GOP base that follows him.
Mr. Avella, what do you think the impact of these remarks will be on the wider discourse between the Republican candidates? Will people want to follow him or will they want to dissociate themselves from Donald Trump?
There is no indication that a significant percentage, let alone a majority, of Republicans agree with Mr. Trump on his idea. In fact, Mr. Trump has held many positions that now he no longer supports. So who knows how long he's going to promote this idea. This does underscore, though, is, and something that Americans across the board are in agreement with, it's the need for border security. And it's the need for knowing who's coming into our country and making sure we know that those who are coming here want to do so to live peacefully and not to cause harm to Americans. But to underscore that there is no support amongst Republican primary voters, or no significant support amongst Republican primary voters to support Mr. Trump in this idea that he said just yesterday.
Mr. Slum, what about the impact on American citizens, Americans such as yourself, who follow the Muslim faith? Does it make you feel uncomfortable, even although you're not apparently the target of what Mr. Trump's talking about?
Absolutely. All Muslims are affected by this rhetoric. When, I'm also a parent, and I have to explain to my children when we go to the mosque to be wary and careful and look out for people, because we now have increased vandalism. We have protesters outside of mosques with guns. And so these provocations can embolden people to, take actions that are un-American and can actually hurt someone. So even though I'm not an immigrant, I'm, born and raised here, as well as my descendants, it still impacts me as a Muslim, and even more so my wife, who visibly, when she goes out grocery shopping and running errands, wears hijab, and she can also be targeted.
And Mr. Avella, this idea, even if Donald Trump was elected, could never come to pass, could it? It seems to be against the Constitution.
The idea is against the Constitution, and first, let me also say, Adam, it would have to get through the House and Senate, and as we've been discussing, there isn't support amongst Republicans in Congress to push an idea like this. So that's the first part. The second part of that is that it's only December. We haven't selected our nominee yet. And Mr. Trump, who is running as an outsider, has to go against history in that we have not nominated someone on the outside without having had elective experience since 1940. That it is not in the nature of Republicans to nominate someone who they can't look at the rhetoric to which they use, the message which they communicate, and how that tracks up, or stacks up, I should say, with their actual voting record. And Republicans who actually turn out in elections use that track record and that message to determine, do they really support the basic fundamentals of Republicanism? And on that, we're going to see when voting starts happening in Iowa who they're going to actually support. And there is increasing evidence and increasing mounting good job by Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Marco Rubio that right now they're the odds-on favorite to get our party's nomination.
Yeah, but Mr. Avella, Donald Trump is already talking about running as a third-party candidate if he's not treated with respect, and that would be a disaster, would it not, for the Republicans?
It almost would ensure the election of Hillary Clinton as the President of the United States, that you would divide the Republican caucus and put more, thus, if you take Mr. Trump's independent vote, which probably in a general election would be somewhere between 10 and 12%, and siphon many of that off from who the Republican nominee is, it almost ensures the election of Hillary Clinton.
Finally, Mr. Salam, I don't know what your politics are, but do you accept those reassurances that what Trump is saying do not reflect the general view of Republicans?
I generally do believe that. I'm personally independent. However, what bothers me, I hear other condemnations about Trump's latest, comments and policy positions. However, many of the top Republican candidates right now have said some very disturbing things about Muslims just in the last several weeks, referring to Syrian refugees as dogs. Jeb Bush famously said we should only allow Christians in. And, the poll numbers that the polling that Donald Trump is using comes from Frank Gaffney, and many of these Republicans will be attending his conference soon. So, I don't know if this is a political strategy to finally take a chance at knocking Trump down a couple of pegs. And so the candidates are just saying what's popular with the American public today, or do they sincerely believe that? And I hope they do. George Bush, W. Bush, is famously called Islam a religion of peace. He visited a mosque after 9/11, but the rhetoric is different. These candidates have called Islam a cult, called it dangerous, said it's not compatible with America, completely 360 from our previous president who did not say such things.
Okay, thank you both very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
The hacking group Anonymous has told Sky News how it plans to take Islamic